1953. A wife with a bruised wrist sits across from a police officer. He listens. He nods. Then he drives her husband home. What happened behind closed doors was not a crime. It was a marriage. The law said so. Doctors said so. Judges said so. An entire system was built to make sure she had nowhere to go. This is what that system looked like from the inside. Some words could end a marriage before lunch. Words about money, about loneliness, about what happened behind a locked bedroom door that no minister would acknowledge. This video begins with the financial trap that made silence a survival requirement, the bankbook trick that kept millions of wives locked inside marriages they could not afford to leave. From there, it moves into the vanished ways women survived marriages that were not just unhappy, but physically dangerous. Then comes the centerpiece, 20 covert tricks wives used to hide affairs with a precision that would shame a Cold War intelligence officer, where a misplaced receipt or an unfamiliar perfume or a smile held 1 second too long could end everything. After that, how women dealt in secret with a depression that had no name and no doctor willing to treat it. The unspoken deal every husband and wife honored without saying it aloud. And finally, 15 signs a marriage had already died that the whole neighborhood could read, but no one would say out loud. Before 1974, most American banks required a husband's co-signature before a married woman could open a checking account or apply for credit. She could not sign a lease alone. $15 to $25 a week for groceries and children's shoes, every dollar visible, every purchase tracked. A wife with her own money was a wife who could leave. That financial cage is the foundation beneath every cruelty you are about to watch. None of what follows makes sense until you understand that silence was not a personality trait, but an economic condition forced on every wife who could not afford to speak. A screened porch in 1955, the creak of a porch glider, and the smell of fresh-cut grass drifting through the evening air. A woman sets 2 glasses of iced tea on the railing and sits down next to a man who has not looked at her since supper. Inside that house, and inside every house on that block, a wife was managing a world that gave her a wedding band and a set of rules, but no honest language for what was happening inside the marriage itself. The doctor would not name it. The minister called it patience. The neighbor called it none of her business. And so women built their own private architecture of survival. Strategies for endurance, methods for coping, systems for hiding, codes for communicating without speaking, signals for recognizing when a marriage had already died, but no one had permission to say so. What you are about to watch is 5 windows into that architecture. Each one reveals a different face of the same silence that started at the bankbook and ended at the kitchen table. Number 17. The neighbor who kept her porch light on. One woman on the block silently appointed herself the witness. She kept her porch light burning past midnight on the nights it got bad next door. The yellow glow of a 60-watt Sylvania bulb behind a frosted glass fixture. A woman in a cotton housecoat stepping onto her porch with a cup of Sanka, settling into the metal glider, and not going back inside until the house next door went quiet. He knew someone was watching. She knew someone was there. One woman decided another woman was not going to be alone in the dark. And the women who kept that light burning never once spoke about why. Number 16. The grocery money she skimmed 1 dime at a time. She patted the grocery bill, a dime here, a quarter there. Loose change from the A&P slipped into a coat pocket instead of the change purse he checked every Friday. A pound of ground chuck at 39 cents, a box of Tide at 31 cents. She bought the store brand and pocketed the difference. The coins went into a mason jar behind the spick and span under the kitchen sink. By 1957, a woman who skimmed 15 cents a trip for 2 years had close to $30. Enough for 3 nights at a motor court and a Greyhound ticket to her sister's house. She never called it a plan. She called it housekeeping. And every coin was an act of defiance, so small he never noticed it, and so large it might one day save her life. Number 15. The doctor who set the bone and said nothing. The family doctor treated her injuries and never documented the cause. A cracked rib wrapped in Johnson & Johnson adhesive tape, 85 cents at the Rexall drugstore. The doctor pressing gently along her jawline. Does this hurt? How about here? Then the pen moved across the chart. Patient reports a fall. No further treatment required. He knew. She knew he knew. Sometimes he handed her a prescription for Milltown. $2 for a bottle of 50. Today, there are more than 2,000 domestic violence shelters in the United States. In 1955, there were none, not one, in a decade when speaking the truth could cost a woman her children. The doctor's silence was the closest thing to protection the system offered. Number 14. The church was the only door he could not lock. Church attendance was the one activity a husband could not forbid without raising suspicion. Sunday morning service, Wednesday prayer meeting, the quilting circle in the basement. Every single one was an exit. The smell of lemon oil and old hymnals. She sat with the other women, and no one asked about the bruise beneath her collar. But afterward, in the gravel parking lot beside a Ford Country Squire, an older woman might squeeze her hand. You can always call me. He works Tuesdays, doesn't he? The church did not save her, but the parking lot might have. Number 13. An immaculate house was not pride, it was defense. She kept every surface flawless because any imperfection could become the excuse. A dish left in the sink, a toy on the floor. She did not clean for beauty. She cleaned to survive the evening. Pine Sol on linoleum. His dinner on the table at exactly 5:30. His chair pulled out. His Pabst Blue Ribbon poured into a glass before the car door shut. If everything was perfect, there was nothing to punish. Neighbors called her a wonderful homemaker. But the engine behind it was not devotion. It was the cold, daily calculation of a woman who had learned exactly which failures were forgiven and which ones were not. Every method so far operated on the same principle. She did not fight the system. She moved inside it. She used the grocery store, the doctor's office, the church, and the kitchen itself, not to escape, but to build a space just wide enough to breathe. This was not submission. It was engineering. And the reason these methods worked is the same reason they have been forgotten. They were invisible by design, but some of her methods were not invisible at all. Some were chemical. Number 12. The nerve pills and the bottle behind the bleach. Millions of American women in the 1950s were prescribed tranquilizers to cope with lives they were not permitted to describe honestly. Milltown was approved in 1955. By 1957, 1 billion tablets had been sold. Advertisements in McCall's showed a smiling woman in a clean kitchen with the tagline for the anxiety of everyday life. $2 at the pharmacy. No questions asked. And in the kitchen, a bottle of Taylor cooking sherry on the shelf between the vanilla extract and the vinegar. A tablespoon for the recipe, a long sip for the cook. Nobody counted the bottles. Today, Americans spend over $300 billion a year on mental health services. In 1956, a woman's entire mental health plan fit inside a brown glass bottle. Nobody offered her anything better. Number 11. The party line warning system. In rural America, telephone party lines shared by 4 to 8 households became an informal early warning network. A woman calling her neighbor at 9 o'clock at night. "I just wanted to let you know the roast is burning." A sentence that meant nothing to an outsider and everything to the woman on the other end. It meant he is drinking. It meant get the children ready. It meant leave the back door unlocked. Party lines cost $2.50 a month from Bell Telephone. For some women, they were a lifeline no engineer ever intended to build. When private lines replaced them in the 1960s, that network disappeared overnight. Number 10. Sending the children next door before it started. She learned the signs before he crossed the threshold, the sound of the car, the way the front door closed, the weight of his footsteps, a 6-year-old in pajamas carrying a younger sibling down the back porch steps in the dark. A screen door eased shut so it would not bang. The neighbor's kitchen door already open. A plate of graham crackers and a glass of milk already on the table. The neighbor never asked why they came. Sometimes it was an hour. Sometimes it was all night. In the morning, the children walked back home. Their mother had combed her hair and made pancakes. The children always knew. And the neighbor who opened that door every single time gave those children something their mother could not. One room in the world where no one was afraid. Number 9. She used his vanity as a shield. A man who hid his wife behind closed doors would not mark her face the morning of the company picnic. She learned to schedule around his pride. His boss coming for Saturday pot roast. His bowling league banquet at the Moose Lodge. She planned social engagements in clusters because a visible bruise was the one thing his reputation could not survive. She hosted the bridge card party, not because she wanted to, because every evening with witnesses was a night without fists. And he never once realized the dinner party was not for him. It was instead of him. Number 8. The savings account at a different bank. Some women opened a small passbook savings account at a bank across town where no teller recognized his face. A First Federal passbook tucked inside a Butterick sewing pattern envelope in the bottom of her sewing basket. Deposits of $2, $3, $5 if she had sold eggs that week. The passbook never came into the house. Today, roughly 1 in 4 American women report having a financial account their partner does not know about. In 1956, that secret passbook was not financial planning. It was proof she believed in a future he had not approved. And for some women, just knowing it existed was enough to stay alive one more year. Not a single method on this list so far involved the police, a lawyer, or any institution designed to protect citizens. The entire survival system was private, built by women, maintained by women, hidden from men. Every institution in the 1950s was designed to preserve the marriage, not the woman inside it. So she built her own. And some of the most desperate methods looked from the outside like the most ordinary moments in a housewife's week. Number 7. Going home. To mother for the weekend. Going home to mother was the only acceptable way for a married woman to leave her husband's house without scandal. The gravel driveway. The screen door. Her mother standing at the stove, not asking a single question. 2 nights in her childhood bed with her daughter beside her and a door that did not need to be locked. The silent drive home Sunday evening, the children asleep in the back seat. The weekend was never discussed and never explained, but the pattern repeated. Her mother knew. Her mother always knew. And the fact that she never said it aloud was not denial. It was the only shelter she could build. Number 6. She memorized his schedule. Like a science. She knew which nights were dangerous and which were safe. Payday was dangerous. Wednesday after bowling league was usually safe. In her mind, never written down, a second calendar ran underneath the one from the SO station on the kitchen wall. Most dangerous window, Friday 6 o'clock to Saturday noon. Safe days, Sundays after church, weeknights when his mother called. She timed errands, baths for the children, and her own sleep around his rhythms with the precision of a factory shift schedule. She could not change him, so she mapped him. That map was the most important document in the household. It was never written down because writing it down would have meant admitting it was real. Number 5, the science of not setting him off. She learned exactly which words, which tones, which expressions triggered him, and she removed everyone from her behavior. Eyes down when he spoke, agreement before he finished the sentence, his beer in the glass, never the can, his newspaper unfolded on the arm of the lazy boy. She rehearsed her voice in the bathroom mirror, calm, even, warm enough to pass, flat enough not to provoke. The performance ran 7 days a week with no intermission. Every modern therapist would call this hypervigilance. Every woman who lived it called it Tuesday. She was not broken. She was reading the room with a precision most people will never need, and she did it for decades. Number 4, sleeping in the children's room. On the worst nights, she moved into the children's bedroom, not because the children needed her there, because he would not follow her there. The narrow space between the twin bed and the wall, a chenille bedspread pulled over her legs, the glow of a Donald Duck nightlight plugged into the baseboard, her body between the door and the bed, his footsteps in the hallway, the doorknob not turning, the footsteps going back, the silence that meant it was over for tonight. Even a violent man had a line he would not cross in front of a sleeping child. She bet her safety on that line every single night, and every night she was right is a night she does not talk about. Number 3, she befriended the right wife in town. She cultivated one specific friendship, the police chief's wife, the pastor's wife, the foreman's wife at the plant where her husband worked. Not for gossip, for leverage she hoped never to use. Coffee at her kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, a Pyrex percolator, a plate of Nabisco social tea biscuits. The friendship was real, but underneath it ran a calculation as old as survival itself. If things ever got bad enough to need a witness, that witness would be believed. In 1956, a woman's word meant nothing unless it was backed by the right last name. And the woman across the table probably understood exactly what was happening, because she had seen it before. 17 methods. Not one required a telephone hotline, a shelter address, or a courtroom. Every single one ran on observation, patience, and a knowledge of human behavior so precise it could have been published as a clinical manual. It never was, because the women who knew these things had no language for what they were surviving, no audience that would have listened, and no guarantee that speaking would not make everything worse. So the knowledge moved the only way it could, mother to daughter, silence to silence. And it is almost gone. But the most devastating survival method on this entire list was not something she did for herself. It was something she did to her daughter, without ever saying a single word. Number 2, teaching her daughter without words. She never sat her daughter down and explained what was happening. She did not have to. The lessons were delivered in gestures, in glances, in the architecture of daily life. And her daughter absorbed every one. A 10-year-old girl watching her mother's posture change when the car pulled into the driveway, watching her mother's hands move faster at the stove, watching her mother check the hallway mirror and smooth her hair and adjust her expression before the front door opened. The girl learned, read his mood before he speaks. Clear the table, before he asks. Make yourself small when the air in the room changes. Do not cry where he can hear you. She learned all of this by the age of 12 and could not have explained how she knew it. It was in her body before it was in her mind. The mother did not mean to teach it. The daughter did not choose to learn it. And 40 years later, that daughter still checks the front door when she hears a car engine and cannot explain why. Some lessons survive the house they were learned in. Some lessons survive everything. Number 1. The escape plan. She carried for 30 years and never used. She had a plan. It lived entirely inside her head. A route, a destination, a sequence of steps rehearsed so many times they were worn smooth. She never wrote it down, she never told a soul, and she never used it. The Greyhound schedule memorized from the board at the downtown bus terminal. The 6:15 a.m. to Indianapolis that stopped in Terre Haute. Her sister's address on Maple Street. The $31.40 in the passbook at First Federal. 2 changes of clothes for each child that would fit in the Samsonite train case stored on the top shelf of the hall closet. The spare house key under the 3rd flower pot on the back porch. The route from the back door to the neighbor's driveway. She rehearsed it on the worst nights, lying in the dark, listening to him breathe. Every detail in place, every step accounted for. She ran through it the way a pilot runs through a pre-flight checklist. Calm, precise, complete. And then morning came, and she made breakfast. And she stayed. She stayed for the children. She stayed because divorce Wohlschures in 1956 meant a judge could take her kids. She stayed because a woman alone with 3 children and no work history and $31 would not survive past Tuesday. She stayed because the plan itself was enough, not enough to leave, enough to survive. Knowing she could go meant she did not have to. And she carried that plan for 30 years, through every bad night, every quiet morning, every holiday photograph where she smiled with her hand on his shoulder. She never told a living soul. And somewhere right now, one of those women is still here, sitting in a kitchen, 90 years old, and she remembers every single detail. Not because someone reminded her, because some things you carry in your body, not your mind, and they never leave. Survival required calculation practiced daily with no audience and no reward. But some women were not just surviving inside a marriage. They were living a separate life within it, and keeping that life invisible required more nerve than anything you just watched. She had learned to read a room the way a soldier reads a battlefield, and she never once let it show on her face. That skill did not disappear when the front door closed behind her. Number 20. The 2-ring signal on the party line, a prearranged code on the shared neighborhood telephone line. 2 rings. Hang up. Call back in 10 minutes. The black Bakelite bell system, 302 model, sat on a doily on the hall table. The cloth-wrapped cord coiled like a sleeping snake. There was the faint click of a neighbor lifting her receiver down the block on the same circuit. Party line service from American Telephone and Telegraph cost $3.50 a month in 1954. Private service cost $7. Most working families took the cheaper option. That meant up to 8 households shared one wire. Every wife on a party line knew that click. They also knew which neighbor was listening. There was an unspoken agreement among certain women on certain streets. I will not tell on you if you do not tell on me. That was the first sisterhood most of them ever joined. But the telephone was only one channel. The mailbox was another. And the front porch spoke in objects, not words. Number 19. The hairpin in the screen door. A bobby pin slid into the screen mesh at a specific angle. Coast clear. Husband at work. Come around the back. Gala bobby pins, the black enamel kind, sold 10 cents a card at the Woolworth lunch counter in every small town in America. The aluminum screen doors with the scrolled S or the wheat stalk grill, the soft thwack of the spring closer. A child walking past on the sidewalk would never notice it. The pin sat in the screen for 90 minutes, and then it was gone. A signal that left no paper trail, no fingerprint, no echo. Only the person it was meant for would ever see it. Signals were for the porch. Cover stories were for the calendar. And Tuesday afternoons belonged to one institution above all others. Number 18. The bridge club that never played bridge. The standing Tuesday or Thursday afternoon ladies' bridge club. Sometimes real, sometimes a rotating mutual alibi. Folding card tables set up in the living room. Bicycle playing cards in the blue box. Pimento cheese spread on Pepperidge Farm white bread with the crusts cut off. A pitcher of iced tea sweating on a tin tray. The hostess was supposed to rotate, but somehow it was always at Marjorie's. A husband who asked too many questions about bridge scores looked petty. A husband who never asked looked secure. Every wife knew which kind she had married. The bridge club covered the afternoon. The hotel register, 2 towns over, covered everything else. Number 17. Mr. and Mrs. Smith at the hotel register. Signing into a downtown commercial hotel under a false name. Paid in cash. The Statler in Buffalo. The Roosevelt in New Orleans. The Edison in Midtown Manhattan. A double room cost $8 to $14 a night in 1957. The fountain pen chained to the registration desk. The bellhop who had seen everything and remembered nothing for a $1 tip. Front desk clerks ran an unwritten code of discretion that survived 2 world wars. That code died in 1986 when credit cards became mandatory for incidental charges. There is no Smith line on a Marriott reservation today. The hotel left no trace on paper, but the body always left a trace, and that is where the bottles on the vanity came in. Number 16. The perfume rotation. A second perfume, kept somewhere other than the bedroom vanity, used only on the afternoons that mattered. Evening in Paris in the cobalt blue bourgeois bottle, sold at the dime store for 99 cents. That was the everyday scent, the one the husband smelled on the pillow. Then a real bottle of Chanel No. 5, or Schiaparelli's shocking in the pink bottle shaped like a dressmaker's form, kept in a glove compartment or tucked inside a hat box. A woman's scent was her signature. Carrying 2 of them meant carrying 2 selves. Some women did this for 40 years and never once mixed them up. Perfume could be reapplied. Lipstick was harder, unless you knew the trick. Number 15. The reverse lipstick on the collar. Putting her own lipstick on her husband's collar before he came home. Any other mark already there became invisible by being expected. Revlon's Fire and Ice, launched in 1952, was the most sold lipstick in American history at the time. $1.25 a tube. The waxy red smear pressed onto a starched white arrow dart collar. A wife pressing herself against him at the front door before he had even taken his hat off. It looked like affection. It functioned like camouflage. The cleverest covers were always the ones that looked like love. Pause here for a moment. Every one of these tricks required a husband who was not really paying attention, and a wife who had figured that out years ago. The American marriage of 1955 was not for most women the postcard. It was a contract signed at 20 between 2 strangers who then spent 40 years pretending to know each other. Some of them filled the silence with bridge clubs. Some filled it with gin. Some filled it with a man in a 2-tone Buick parked 3 streets over on Wednesdays at 2. The tricks were not really about sex. They were about being allowed for 90 minutes a week to be a person nobody at home was looking at. And once you had your 90 minutes, you had to account for them. Every dollar, every receipt, every minute on the odometer. Number 14, the padded grocery receipt. Inflating the grocery list to skim cash off the household budget without it showing. The A&P. Kroger, Piggly Wiggly. A loaf of Wonder Bread, 18 cents. A pound of Maxwell House coffee, 79 cents. The brown paper receipt curling at the edges, totaled by hand and pencil by a clerk in a starched apron. The husband who handed over $20 every Friday for groceries and never once looked at the slip. Every dollar squirreled away was independence. Most women in 1955 routinely faced banking policies that barred them from opening a bank account in their own name without a husband co-signing. The grocery receipt was the only ledger they controlled. Cash had to be spent somewhere, and the department store ladies' lounge was a city unto itself. Number 13. The department store powder room. Using the cavernous ladies' lounges at Marshall Field's, Wanamaker's, Gimbel's, and Hudson's as private meeting spaces and message drops, the lounge on the 7th floor at Marshall Field's in Chicago had upholstered chaises in pale green silk. A black attendant in a starched uniform handed out fresh hand towels. A tip dish sat by the sink with quarters glinting in the bottom. Cigarette smoke layered with the smell of Coty face powder and Jergens lotion. The husband would never enter. The lounge was the one square of American real estate outside her own bathroom, where a wife could not be followed. Notes could be passed in a powder room, but letters needed an address, and not the one on her driver's license. Number 12. The downtown post office box. A rented post office box, paid in cash, at a federal post office in a different part of town. Brass-doored boxes with little combination dials in long rows under the marble lobby light. $1.50 every 6 months in 1953. The little brass key on a separate ring she kept inside the silk lining of her pocketbook. Every letter she could not bring home went there. Some women kept those boxes their entire lives. When they died, the keys were found in jewelry boxes by their daughters, and the daughters never knew what they had once opened. Mail was one route in, the dry cleaner's counter was another, and it ran on a code older than the telephone. Number 11. The dry cleaner as go-between. Using the neighborhood dry cleaner, almost always a family-run shop with a back room, to leave and pick up messages or small parcels. The smell of perchloroethylene and steam-pressed cotton, the motorized conveyor of garments on wire hangers under thin plastic sleeves, the handwritten ticket stub torn in duplicate, the proprietor who knew your husband's shirt size by heart, the dry cleaner knew your husband's collar measurement and your perfume and your secret. He never said a word. That kind of discretion was a profession. It does not exist anymore. Every wife needed a reason to be gone for 2 hours on the same day every week. That is what the Standing Friday appointment was built for. Number 10. The Standing Friday Beauty Parlor appointment. A weekly 2-hour wash and sat at the same salon. Sometimes real, sometimes elastic. The hooded chrome hairdryer that roared like a small airplane. The chemical sting of Aquanet hairspray. The permanent wave solution that made your eyes water. Lucky Strikes burning in a glass ashtray on the manicure table. A shampoo and set ran $2.50. A permanent wave, $8. The beautician, always called by her first name, who knew everything about every wife on the block. The beautician was the priest of mid-century American womanhood. She heard every confession and gave no penance. Some of those women carried other women's secrets to the grave. But the body has to come home, and the body always leaves a trace on the breath. Number 9. The Listerine on the vanity. The mouthwash habit practiced openly so it looked routine. The amber glass bottle of Listerine antiseptic sat on the bathroom shelf next to the Pepsodent and the Burma shave. Send breath squares in the little paper packet, a nickel at any newsstand. Pall Mall smoke and Lucky Strike smoke layered under it all. A husband who came home to a wife already smelling of mint never thought twice. The best covers were the ones a husband had been trained by advertising to expect. Listerine sold over 15 million bottles a year by 1958. A lot of those bottles were doing a second job. Pause again. Notice what every one of these has in common. None of them required lying. They required arranging. The 1950s wife did not improvise. She built systems. She kept ledgers in her head that a tax accountant would envy. Which neighbors sat on the porch on Wednesdays? Which clerk worked the register on Thursday afternoons? Which dry cleaner closed early on Saturdays? Which beautician would cover for her if a husband called the salon? She was running a small corporation with a staff of 1. And she was doing it in a girdle, in 2-inch heels, on 3 hours of sleep, with a roast in the oven set to be done at 5:55 exactly. The competence of that generation is almost unspeakable now. Consider what she was working with. No global positioning system tracking the family car. No itemized credit card statement arriving in the mail on the 15th. Women were frequently denied their own credit cards until 1974, when the Equal Credit Opportunity Act finally passed. Before that, banks and businesses routinely refused to let a married woman obtain a mortgage, sign a lease, or open a checking account without her husband's signature. She was, in the eyes of the law, barely an adult. And yet in the eyes of the neighborhood, she was the woman who ran everything, who paid the milkman on Tuesday, who knew which morning the iceman still came, who remembered every birthday on both sides of the family without a calendar. That contradiction is the heart of it. Powerless on paper, sovereign in practice. The kitchen was the only office she would ever hold, and she ran it like General Motors. The Hoover upright vacuum in the hall closet, the Singer sewing machine in the spare bedroom, the pressure cooker on the back burner, the Sunbeam toaster on the counter, every appliance a tool, every tool an extension of a mind that nobody, including her husband, was studying closely. She read the Ladies' Home Journal at the kitchen table and folded the corner of the page where the article ended. She knew the Sears Roebuck catalog by heart. She watched as the world turns on the black and white Philco at 1:30 every weekday afternoon, ironing handkerchiefs through the entire half hour. And somewhere inside that domestic choreography, she carved out 90 minutes a week that belonged only to her. Whether she spent those minutes at a sewing circle, a confession booth, a hotel room, or a friend's apartment with a canary by the window, the minutes were hers, nobody else's. Not for the rest of her natural life would she give them back. And consider the geography she was working inside. A neighborhood of 300 houses where every front lawn was watched by at least 4 other front lawns. The mailman who knew which envelopes came in a woman's handwriting. The milkman who saw which back doors were unlocked at 10 in the morning. The paperboy on his Schwinn who noticed which driveways held an extra car on a Wednesday afternoon. Every block was a small intelligence agency, and every wife knew it. The trick was not to outrun the surveillance. The trick was to feed it the story it already wanted to believe. So she joined the Methodist Ladies Auxiliary. She brought a tuna casserole to every funeral within 6 blocks. She mailed Christmas cards to 47 households every December, signed in her best Palmer Method cursive. She volunteered at the Cub Scout pack meeting on the 2nd Monday of the month. She made herself so visibly, predictably, unimpeachably good that nobody, not even her own mother-in-law, would ever think to ask where she really was on Thursday afternoons at 3. The reputation was the camouflage. The casserole was the camouflage. The Christmas card list was the camouflage. By the time she was 40, she had built a public self so thick that the private self could move around behind it undetected for the rest of her life. Number 8. The coded want ads. Coded personal messages in the classified section of the daily paper. The newspaper, that thing every husband read at the kitchen table over his coffee, was also a postal service. For those who knew how to read it differently, the smell of newsprint on a man's fingers at breakfast, the personals column tucked between lost and found and help wanted female. 3 lines for 50 cents at the Cleveland Plain Dealer or the Detroit Free Press. To my Robin, Thursday, the usual place, 3 o'clock, signed J. Hundreds of them ran every week in every major city paper from 1948 until about 1972. Some wives clipped them out and saved them folded inside a Bible. The Bible was the one book a husband would never open uninvited. Some secrets had to be carried on her person, and the compact in a woman's handbag was rarely just a compact. Number 7. The compact with the second compartment. Powder compacts manufactured with a hidden compartment beneath the powder pan. Stratton of London. Volupte. Elgin American. The silver-plated and enamel-lidded compacts that were standard 1950s pocketbook equipment. $4 to $15 at the cosmetics counter at Lord & Taylor. A press of a hidden tab, and the powder pan lifted on a tiny hinge to reveal a flat space beneath. A folded note. A key. A photograph the size of a postage stamp. A woman's purse was the last sovereign territory she owned. A husband who went through it crossed a line that even other husbands judged him for. Most of them never did. And on the top shelf of every bedroom closet sat something a husband had even less reason to touch. Number 6. The hat box on the top shelf. The round cardboard hat box kept on the closet's high shelf, supposedly storing a wedding hat or a black mourning veil. Actually used as a strongbox for letters, photographs, and cash. Hat boxes from B. Altman, Bonwit Teller, and Lord & Taylor in pale pink or hunter green with gross grain ribbon handles. The faint smell of mothballs and lavender sachet on the lid. A husband who pulled it down would find a hat on top. Underneath was the rest of her life. When those women died in the 1990s and the 2000s, their daughters cleaned out the closets and found the hat boxes. A lot of daughters never told their fathers what was inside. Some of those daughters are still not telling. Some go-betweens came to the front door in a uniform. And the uniform was the perfect disguise. Number 5. The Avon Lady Calling Card. The Avon representative, or the Fuller Brushman, or the Tupperware lady used as cover, sometimes as actual courier. The cardboard sample case opened on the kitchen table. The little glass tubes of Avon Topaz cologne with the gold caps. The doorbell at 10:30 in the morning, exactly. The neighbor across the street who saw the visit through her front window and thought nothing of it. Door-to-door selling was the perfect cover because it was expected. A woman in a kitchen with an Avon lady at the table was the most ordinary scene in America. Ordinary was the best disguise ever invented. And when she did leave the house, she always came home with proof of where she said she had been. Number 4. The matinee ticket stub. The single movie theater ticket stub kept in the coat pocket as documentary evidence of an afternoon supposedly spent at the pictures. Lowe's, the RKO Palace, the Bijou on Main Street. A matinee ticket, 50 cents in 1956. The stub printed on pink or yellow cardstock, perforated down the middle. A bag of jujubes in the pocketbook, half-eaten, for verisimilitude. A faint smell of buttered popcorn on the wool coat. She could describe the picture in detail because she had seen it the week before, alone, on a Tuesday, learning her lines. Nothing about her performance was accidental. Pause one last time. The thing nobody says about this era is how intelligent it required a woman to be. There were no apps, no global positioning system in the dashboard, no text messages to delete. Every alibi was constructed from scratch, every week, in her own head, while she packed school lunches and ironed shirts and listened to Arthur Godfrey on the radio. She was a logistics officer running a covert operation out of a kitchen with a hotpoint range. We tell ourselves the 1950s housewife was simple. She was not simple. She was contained. There is a difference. And the difference is the entire story. The last three were not really tricks at all. They were structures, the architecture of the lie itself. Number 3, the friend's apartment. Borrowing a single friend's apartment, almost always a divorced or widowed friend, for an afternoon. The one the neighborhood whispered about. Watching the cat, she would say. A walk up on the 3rd floor of a brick building near downtown. A kitchenette with a Hotpoint 2-burner stove. A canary in a brass cage by the window. A neighbor's tabby cat that did, in fact, need feeding. The key on a thin red ribbon kept in the glove box of the Chevrolet. The divorced friend was the one woman on the block nobody wanted to be. And the one woman every wife on the block secretly needed. She held the key, literally, and in many of these houses there was one other person who knew everything and said nothing for 50 years. Number 2, the maid who saw it all. The household help, almost always a black woman, in the South and in many northern suburbs alike, who came in 2 days a week and saw everything. The starched white apron tied at the back. The bus ride in from across town that started at 5:30 in the morning. Pine Sol on the kitchen linoleum. Argo starch sprayed on the shirt collars. A wage of $3 to $5 a day in 1955. She knew which afternoons the husband was at the office and which afternoons he was not. She knew which side of the bed had been slept in and which had not. She kept her job by keeping her mouth shut. The silence of those women is one of the great unwritten histories of this country. They saw more of mid-century American marriage than any sociologist ever did. And after every one of these tricks, after the hairpin and the hat box and the maid's averted eyes, every wife came home to the same room and performed the same ritual that hid all the rest. Number 1, the roast at 6 o'clock. The single most effective cover ever devised. The perfect domestic performance. Dinner on the table at 6 sharp. Husband's slippers waiting by the chair. Children washed and combed. Wife in fresh lipstick at the front door. A pot roast in a Pyrex casserole, browned in the oven at 325 degrees since 2 in the afternoon. Green beans from a Del Monte can, drained and warmed with a pat of butter. Mashed potatoes whipped with a Sunbeam Mixmaster. A martini built on a silver tray. 3 parts Beefeater gin, 1 part Noilly Prat vermouth. A green olive on a toothpick. Handed to him before he had taken his hat off. The Westinghouse radio playing low in the corner, everything in its place. The roast was the alibi. The ironed shirt was the alibi. The whole house smelling of onions and Johnson's floor wax at 6 o'clock was the alibi. The 1950s wife did not hide her affair in a hotel or a hatbox. She hid it inside the perfect performance of being the woman everyone expected her to be. That was the trick. That was always the trick. The houses these women ran are mostly gone now. The party lines are gone. The hat boxes are in estate sales for $5 apiece. The maids have died, most of them carrying what they knew. The husbands went first. They almost always do. And the wives, the few still alive, are 92 years old in nursing homes in Central Florida. They still will not say, not to their daughters, not to anyone. Whatever they did on Thursday afternoons in 1957 belongs to them. It was the one thing in their entire lives that did. Somewhere right now, there is a hat box on a closet shelf in a house being cleaned out by strangers. Nobody opens it. The estate sale ticket says $5. Every trick in that playbook was built by a woman who had already decided she deserved something the marriage refused to give her. But not every wife who suffered in silence was hiding a second life. Some were fighting a war inside their own minds, with no name for the enemy and no ally allowed through the front door. There was no diagnosis for what she carried and no one waiting to ask if she needed help. She simply got up the next morning and did it again. Number 17, the clothesline. Women hung laundry outside every day, even in winter. The one chore that required her to leave the house, stand in sunlight, and breathe open air. The weight of a wet cotton sheet pulled from the basket. Wooden clothespins from a canvas bag. The sound of a bedsheet catching wind and snapping flat. The smell of sun-dried linen that no dryer sheet has ever matched. 15 minutes outside, arms overhead, natural light on her face. Modern research confirms that sunlight exposure, bilateral arm movement, and outdoor air are frontline treatments for depression. She was doing all three with a basket of wet towels. She just knew the days she skipped the clothesline were worse. Number 16, the afternoon lie down. Women laid down for 20 minutes after the lunch dishes were cleared. Door closed, shades drawn. Not sleeping, just horizontal and unreachable. The chenille bedspread, the ticking alarm clock, midday light through Venetian blinds, bars of gold across the ceiling. She lay on top of the covers in her house dress. Set the alarm for 2:45 so she would be upright before the children came home. 20 minutes of stillness in a day that never stopped demanding motion. She called it a rest. It was closer to a controlled collapse, the only 20 minutes that belonged to her. Number 15, the obsessive clean. A woman scrubbing the kitchen floor on her hands and knees twice a week was not being admired for her standards. She was managing something she could not name. Spick and span powder at 20 cents a box. A scrub brush worn flat. Hands red to the wrist. The smell of Bon Ami cleanser on porcelain. Ammonia and water on the linoleum. She moved through the house room by room, corner by corner. When the house was clean, the feeling inside had somewhere to land. The visible order absorbed the invisible chaos. A clean house was the one thing she could fix, so she fixed it until her knees ached. Number 14, the radio serial. Women tuned in to daytime serials every afternoon at the same time, alone in the kitchen. They wept openly for characters whose sadness was permitted. The guiding light on CBS radio, then television after 1952. As The World Turns debuting in 1956, the slow organ music between scenes. A woman standing at the ironing board with tears running down her face over a fictional woman's grief. Because that grief had a name and a plot line, and nobody told it to be quiet. 15-minute episodes sponsored by Procter & Gamble. The term soap opera came from the detergent ads. She was not allowed to cry for herself, so she cried for Helen Trent. The tears were real, only the reason was borrowed. Number 13, the garden. A woman on her knees in the dirt pulling weeds for an hour was performing one of the most effective antidepressant rituals known to science. She called it gardening. Burpee seed packets at 10 cents each. A hand trowel with a wooden handle, the smell of turned earth after rain. Marigolds along the walk, the feeling of pulling a deep-rooted weed clean out of the soil. The resistance, the give, the release. Soil bacteria called Mycobacterium vacci have been shown to trigger serotonin production on contact with skin. She was medicating herself through her hands and never knew it. The garden did not talk back. It did not need dinner. It grew when she tended it. She could manage the garden and the radio and the scrub brush. But some days required something stronger, something with a prescription label or something hidden behind the vanilla extract. Number 12, the nerve tonic. Before tranquilizers, women bought patent medicine nerve tonics from the drugstore. Most were 15 to 25% alcohol. Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound at 13.5% alcohol. Hadacol, marketed as a vitamin supplement, 12% alcohol, sold over the counter for $1.25 in 1950. The amber glass bottle. The tablespoon dose at 10 in the morning and again at 3. A warm herbal taste that settled the shaking in her hands. Senator Dudley LeBlanc of Louisiana created Hadacol. When asked what it was good for, he said it was good for $5.5 million for me last year. She was not drinking. She was taking her tonic. Nobody in the house questioned the difference. Number 11, the doctor's prescription. A woman who told her doctor she felt nervous or tired all the time walked out with a prescription, not a conversation. Milltown, also called meprobamate, approved in 1955. 36 million prescriptions in its first year. A small white tablet taken with water. Doctors prescribed it for anxiety, backaches, insomnia. By 1956, 1 in 20 Americans was taking it. A woman could walk into her physician's office, say the word nerves, and walk out 10 minutes later with a 30-day supply. No follow-up. 40 cents for 30 tablets. The system did not want to know what was wrong with her. It wanted her quiet. Milltown made her quiet. Number 10, the morning coffee and cigarette. The first cigarette with the first cup of coffee, alone at the table before anyone woke, was not a habit. It was the only 5 minutes of peace she got all day. Folgers or Maxwell House percolated on the stovetop, the aluminum percolator knocking softly, a Chesterfield or a Lucky Strike at 23 cents a pack. The flare of a match in the dark kitchen, the first drag drawn all the way down, steam rising from the cup, no children talking, no husband needing. 5 minutes of caffeine and nicotine and silence at 5:50 in the morning. It was the only ritual she never shared. The house was hers for exactly as long as that cigarette lasted. Notice what is happening. Not one of these women used the word depression. They did not have the vocabulary. They had the vocabulary of housework, of chores, of keeping busy. The treatment disguised itself as the routine. The saddest part is not that they suffered. It is that they believed suffering was simply what women did. Number 9, the sewing basket. Mending, darning, embroidery, quilt piecing. Handwork that kept her fingers moving and her mind on a single stitch. A wicker sewing basket with a pin cushion lid. Spools of coats and Clark thread at 5 cents each. A steel thimble on the middle finger. The quiet pull of thread through cotton. Darning a sock over a wooden egg. The meditative focus of cross-stitch, counting, repeating, following a pattern that made sense when nothing else did. Clinicians now call it bilateral repetitive motor activity with focused attention. She called it mending. The basket sat beside her chair every evening. A woman with busy hands did not have to explain why she was quiet. Number 8, the walk to nowhere. I am going for a walk. The only acceptable sentence a housewife could use to leave her own home without a destination or a child in tow. Flat shoes, a cardigan if it was cool, no water bottle, no pedometer, no earbuds, just sidewalk and trees and her own footsteps. Around the block twice, past the Methodist church, past the gas station on Elm. 20 minutes of forward motion with no one asking a question. Rhythmic walking is now prescribed by therapists for anxiety and rumination. She did not call it exercise, she called it getting some AIR. And when she came back, she could set the table again. Number 7. The letter. Women wrote long letters to sisters, mothers, and school friends in other towns. The letter was the only private conversation she had that could not be overheard. Blue Crane stationery from the 5 and dime. A Schieffer fountain pen. The scratch of the nib on cotton paper. She sat at the kitchen table after the children were in bed and wrote 3 pages to her sister in Michigan. She said things on paper she would never say aloud. I do not know what is wrong with me. Some days I cannot make myself care about any of it. Sealed, stamped, dropped in the mailbox. 3 cents postage. The letter was the only therapist she could afford, and her sister wrote back every time. Number 6. The church pew. A woman sitting in a church pew every Sunday was doing more than worshiping. She was in the only room outside her house where nobody expected her to serve or produce anything. Wooden pews worn smooth. Hymnals with cracked spines. The pipe organ vibrating in her chest. The sound of a congregation singing, "How Great Thou Art." Not in tune, not performance, just sound from the bodies of people sitting together. A Sunday dress and gloves, the weight of being still in a room full of other women who were also still, some carrying the same unnamed heaviness. The fellowship hour afterward, weak coffee in a paper cup, and the brief coded exchange. "How are you, dear?" "Oh, I am fine, just tired." The hymn did what the nerve pill could not. It let her feel something fully in public without explanation. She found something in that pew, but the next one happened behind a locked door. It may be the most honest moment a 1950s woman ever allowed herself. Number 5. The bathroom cry. She locked the bathroom door, turned on the faucet, and cried. Then washed her face and walked out as though nothing happened. The click of the lock. A porcelain tub with claw feet. The deliberate turn of the hot water tap, enough sound to cover her voice. 5 minutes. 10. However long it took. Cold water on her face afterward. A towel pressed hard against her eyes. A quick check in the mirror. Powder compact applied under the eyes. Door unlocked. I was just freshening up. Nobody asked twice. She did not have a therapist's office. She had a bathroom with a lock. The only room in the house that had one. What we are really looking at is a generation of women who built an entire mental health system out of household objects. A clothesline, a sewing basket, a locked bathroom door, a garden trowel, a fountain pen, and a 3-cent stamp. They had no diagnostic manual, no vocabulary for what they carried. So they invented their own. And every one of their inventions is now a billable therapy technique with a name and a copay. The average therapy session in America today costs $150. Number 4. The piano. A woman at the upright piano after supper was not practicing. She was going somewhere she could not drive to. A Kimball or a Story and Clark upright, slightly out of tune. The weight of the keys under her fingers. Sheet music from the Woolworth's counter. Moonlight Sonata. Tennessee Waltz. The sustain pedal pressed down, letting the notes bleed together. Children at the dining table. Husband in his chair with the paper. Nobody interrupted because a woman at the piano was doing something respectable. Music was the one emotion she was allowed to produce in front of her family without being asked to stop. Number 3. The Bridge Club. A weekly gathering of 4 women around a card table was not a card game. It was group therapy with a cover story. A card table with a green felt top, a double deck of bicycle playing cards, glass dishes of bridge mix, coffee in the good china cups. 4 women in the living room on a Tuesday afternoon. The bidding was the surface. 1 heart, 2 diamonds. The conversation underneath ran deeper. Frank has been drinking again. The doctor says it is my thyroid, but I think he just wanted me out of the office. I sat in the car outside the Kroger and cried for 20 minutes. That happened between tricks at the card table. They called it bridge. It was the closest thing to a support group that era allowed, and every woman at that table knew what the others were carrying. Number 2. The ironing. Women ironed for hours, not because every shirt required pressing, because the rhythm of the iron was the closest thing to meditation in a house that never stopped needing her. A General Electric steam iron at $8.95 from the Sears catalog in 1956. The hiss of steam on damp cotton, a wooden ironing board with a scorched cover, a sprinkle bottle made from an old Coca-Cola bottle with a metal sprinkler top. She dampened the fabric, pressed forward, and for the length of one shirt, the only thing that existed was the crease. The warm, clean smell of pressed cotton and Niagara starch. 1 hour, 2 hours, a full week of laundry that could have been worn wrinkled but was pressed flat because the pressing was the point. The iron did not fix what was broken. But for 2 hours on a Wednesday afternoon, the world narrowed to a single crease, and that was enough to get her to Thursday. Every item on this list has involved a woman going quiet, turning inward, pressing, kneading, walking, sewing, weeping behind a locked door. But the last one made noise, and nobody recognized it for what it was. Number 1. The bread dough. Baking from scratch, especially bread that required kneading, was the most physically demanding and emotionally complete coping ritual a 1950s woman had. Pillsbury or gold medal flour, 5 pounds for 49 cents. Fleischmann's yeast at 5 cents a packet. She combined flour, water, salt, and yeast in a crockery bowl, turned the dough onto the floured counter, and pressed. Folded, pressed again. 10 minutes of rhythmic pushing with the heels of both hands, her full weight leaning into the dough, the elastic resistance of gluten forming under her palms, the smell of yeast activating, warm and alive. Then the weight, a damp cloth over the bowl, the dough rising near the oven. An hour of watching something grow because she tended it. Then the bake. Then the smell reaching every room. The smell that made her children say decades later, "I always felt safe when the house smelled like bread." Kneading bread is now a recognized therapeutic practice. The rhythmic movement, the sensory grounding, the measurable result. She could not control what she felt, but she could feed her family something warm she made with her own hands. On the worst mornings, that was the thread that held everything together. And somewhere this morning, before the sun came up, a woman stood alone at a kitchen counter pressing her hands into dough. She could not tell you why it helped, but it did. Those methods kept a woman standing when the world around her offered no permission to sit down. But the silence she carried was never hers alone. Her husband carried his own version of it, and somewhere between his refusal to speak and her refusal to ask, the two of them had agreed to a contract neither one ever signed. It was a truce built entirely out of what neither party could bring themselves to say, and it held the marriage together far longer than honesty ever could have. Number 14. He handed over the paycheck. She ran the money. On Friday afternoon, he came home and gave her the entire paycheck. She decided where every dollar went. Not a check for most working families until the late 1950s. Actual cash in a small manila envelope. She sat at the kitchen table after supper with a set of labeled envelopes. Rent, groceries, electric, insurance, gas. She divided it by hand. The Montgomery Ward catalog opened beside her if something was needed for the house. A dime store ledger from Woolworth's, 15 cents, where she recorded every penny in pencil. He did not ask how she spent it. She did not ask permission. Today, 78% of Americans say money is their #1 source of relationship stress. In 1954, it was not a conversation. It was a system. He earned the money. She made it work. And the family that held together on $4,200 a year did so because the woman at that kitchen table could stretch a dollar until it screamed. That was not budgeting. That was architecture. Number 13. She never sat down to eat until everyone else was served. The wife served every plate. She ate last, if she ate at all at the same sitting. Corelle dishes or Melmac in turquoise and pink. A pot roast on a Pyrex platter, carrots and potatoes circling the edge. She filled his plate first, then the children's, then set them down with the good Oneida flatware. She brought the rolls, the butter dish, the glass of milk. Then she stood at the counter for a moment, wiping her hands on her apron. Cotton print from Sears, 89 cents on the bolt. She sat down to a plate that was already cooling. He never noticed. The children never noticed. She never expected them to. She fed her family the way she loved them. First, completely and without waiting to be thanked. That chair sat empty until the world was fed. And she filled it last like it was the most natural thing on earth. Number 12. He never complained about a meal. She never served one she had not tested. He ate what was put in front of him. She made sure it was worth eating. The Betty Crocker Picture Cookbook with the red and white gingham cover, 1950 edition. The tuna noodle casserole with crushed Lay's potato chips on top. The meatloaf with a stripe of Hunt's ketchup baked into a glaze. She tested a new recipe on a Tuesday when nothing was at stake. If it failed, she never made it again. Nobody ever knew it existed. A Jell-O mold with fruit cocktail suspended inside. Del Monte in heavy syrup. He sat down, picked up his fork, and said 2 words, "Smells good." That sentence was the entire review. That sentence was enough. Complaining about the food was complaining about her. So he never did. Cooking something careless was disrespecting his labor. So she never did. The silence at that table was not emptiness. It was mutual respect with its mouth full. Number 11. She kept his secrets from her family. He kept hers from his. What happened inside the marriage did not leave the house. Not to her mother, not to his brother, not to anyone. A fight at 11 o'clock at night. Voices kept low so the children would not hear through the plaster walls. The next morning, Sunday dinner at her mother's house. Her in a fresh dress with her good brooch. Him in a pressed shirt, both of them smiling over a plate of pot roast like nothing had happened. Her mother searching her eyes across the table, finding nothing. Today, the average person shares personal relationship details with 5 to 7 people outside the marriage. In the 1950s, that number was 0. They did not air grievances because they understood something that has since been forgotten. The moment you let someone else into your marriage, you hand them a chisel and point them at the foundation. They protected each other from the outside world, even when the outside world was family, especially then. Those first 4 rules governed the ordinary days. the meals, the money, the Monday through Saturday machinery of staying together. But the deeper terms of the deal were about something harder to name. They were about territory. Number 10. The kitchen was hers. The garage was his. Nobody crossed. Each spouse had sovereign domain. She did not rearrange his workbench. He did not reorganize her cabinets. His side, a Craftsman tool chest from Sears, $22 on the installment plan. A pegboard with the outline of every wrench drawn in pencil so he knew if one was missing. A can of 3-in-1 oil. The smell of sawdust and cold concrete. Her side, the Youngstown steel kitchen cabinets, white with chrome handles. The flour canister, the sugar canister, the coffee canister in matching tin. Her spice rack from a S&H Green Stamps catalog. Her system for where the canned goods went. He would not have known where to find the nutmeg if his life depended on it. And he never tried. Respect did not always look like conversation. Sometimes it looked like a man who never once opened the drawer where she kept the good scissors. The territory was small, but it was theirs, and they defended it without a word. Number 9. He drove. She did not question the route. When the family went anywhere, he drove, and he chose the road. A 1955 Ford Fairlane or a Chevrolet Bel Air. A Rand McNally Road Atlas in the glove box. No air conditioning. Windows down on the turnpike. The smell of hot vinyl and juicy fruit gum. She sat passenger side with a child on her lap before seatbelt laws existed. He pulled into a Texaco station for gas, 27 cents a gallon, and she took the children to the restroom without being asked. He never asked for directions. She never offered them. If they were lost together. And she had the decency to let him figure it out without an audience. She did not ride in silence because she was powerless. She rode in silence because she understood that a man who cannot steer his own car cannot steer anything. She gave him the wheel, and he never once drove them off a cliff. Number 8. She set the social calendar. He showed up. She decided who they saw, when, and for how long. He put on a clean shirt and went. A wall calendar from the insurance agent hung by a nail next to the kitchen phone. The Petersons for Saturday supper. Bridge club on Thursday. Her sister's birthday on the 15th. Church potluck the last Sunday of the month. She signed them up for her scalloped potatoes every single time. He found out about the plans when she told him to be home by 5:30. He did not argue. He did not negotiate. He put on his good tie, the one she had picked out at J.C. Penney. He stood at the front door with his hat in his hand at 5:25. She managed the social life because she understood that a family without community is a family without a net. He showed up because he understood that the deal meant trusting her judgment on the things she could see better than he could. And she could always see people better than he could. 8 rules deep, and a pattern is already visible. The deal was not about control. It was about jurisdiction. He had his, she had hers. Neither of them had to do everything. Neither of them had to be everything. They were not partners in the way we use that word now. 2 people negotiating every task from scratch every single day. They were specialists, and the household they built ran like a Swiss watch because each of them knew their post and never abandoned it. Number 7. He fixed what broke. She decided when to replace it. If the screen door sagged, he repaired it. If the toaster finally died, she chose the new one. A Saturday afternoon, the bathroom faucet dripping for a week. He pulled out the Craftsman wrench set and shut off the water valve, replaced the washer himself. A 10-cent rubber disc from the hardware store on Elm Street. No plumber, no phone call. His hands black with pipe grease, the faint smell of plumber's putty. But when the Sunbeam Mixmaster burned out after 9 years of service, she went to the Sears catalog, compared 3 models, placed the order with her Christmas club money. He did not ask what it cost. She did not ask for permission. Today, the average American household spends over $12,000 a year on services their grandparents did with their own hands. He kept the house standing. She kept it livable. And the line between the two was drawn so clearly that neither of them ever stepped over it by accident. Number 6. She ironed his shirts without being asked. He noticed without saying so. His shirts were pressed and hanging in the closet every week. He wore them without comment. But he knew. A GE steam iron, $8.95. The ironing board set up in the kitchen or the back bedroom. A sprinkle bottle made from an old Coca-Cola bottle with a cork stopper and a metal sprinkler head. 10 cents at the 5 and dime. The hiss of steam on damp cotton. The starch smell from a can of Niagara starch from the box or glass bottle. She pressed the collar first, then the yoke, then each sleeve, then the body panels. 7 minutes per shirt, 5 shirts a week, 52 weeks a year, 1,820 shirts across a decade. And not once did either of them call it love, but it was. It was love in its most ordinary and permanent form. Repetition without resentment, service without scorekeeping, the kind that does not announce itself because it does not need to. Number 5. He took discipline. She took comfort. When a child needed correcting, the father handled it. When a child needed holding, the mother was already there. A boy caught lying about a broken window. The mother's face tight, her lips pressed shut. Wait until your father gets home. The sound of the Buick pulling into the driveway at 5:15. The father's voice behind the bedroom door. Low, firm, brief. No shouting. A belt across the back of a chair has emphasis, not always used. Then the boy sitting on the edge of his bed, red-faced. The mother appearing with a glass of milk and a hand on the back of his neck. She did not undermine the punishment. She did not override it. She simply arrived afterward the way weather arrives after a storm. They divided the hardest job in the world without discussing it. He was the wall. She was the door. And a child who grew up between them understood something about structure and tenderness that no parenting book has ever improved upon. Those roles, the iron, the discipline, the calendar, the car, they sound rigid from the outside, but the people who lived inside them will tell you something different. The deal was not a cage. It was a floor, and what was built on that floor is what nobody talks about anymore. Number 4. She made the house ready before he came home, every single day. By 5 o'clock, the house was clean, the children were presentable, and she had changed out of her house dress. Toys picked up off the living room rug. The Hoover run over the carpet one last time. The cushions on the Davenport straightened, the floor wax smell still hanging in the air. Clean, slightly sharp. The children's faces wiped, their shirts tucked. And her. The house dress swapped for a blouse and a skirt. A fresh coat of lipstick, Revlon's Love That Red. Her hair combed, not because she had to look beautiful, because when that front door opened, the first thing he saw was supposed to tell him that this house had not fallen apart while he was gone. Today, 32% of American homes are described by their occupants as cluttered or disorganized. In 1955, that was not a possibility. It was a disgrace. She gave him that order every single day. 365 days a year for decades. She was not performing for him. She was keeping a promise. The deal said, you go out and face the world. When you come back, the world you come back to will be standing. She kept that promise until her hands gave out, and some of them kept it even after that. Number 3. He never told her what happened at work. She never asked. He came home, hung up his hat, and sat in his chair. What happened between 8 and 5 stayed there. The lazy boy recliner or the one good armchair by the Philco television set. His shoes off. The evening paper unfolded. The local daily, 5 cents. The smell of newsprint and his aftershave, Aqua Velva or Old Spice, fading by the end of the day. She brought him coffee, or, on a Friday, a Pabst Blue Ribbon from the icebox. She did not ask about the foreman. She did not ask about the layoff rumors. She did not ask why his jaw was tight. She waited. If he wanted to talk, he talked. If he did not, she let the silence do its work. Today, the average American checks their phone 144 times a day. In 1954, a man came home to a quiet room and a woman who knew that quiet was not emptiness. She understood that the man who walked through that door had spent 8 hours carrying something she could not see. The greatest kindness she could offer was not to make him describe the weight. She gave him the chair and the quiet. And most nights, that was enough to put him back together. Number 2. Neither of them said, I love you. They said it other ways. The phrase was almost never spoken. Not at breakfast, not at bedtime, not on the phone. She said it by leaving his lunch pail on the counter at 5:30 in the morning. A sandwich wrapped in waxed paper, an apple, a thermos of coffee. He said it by checking the oil in her car every Saturday without being asked. The hood of the station wagon propped open, a rag hanging from his back pocket. She said it by laying out his church clothes on Sunday morning. He said it by never missing a single one of their daughter's school plays. Sitting in a folding chair in the gymnasium in his work pants, because he came straight from the plant. Nobody said the words. The words were unnecessary. The evidence was everywhere. They belonged to a generation that believed love was not a feeling you reported. It was a thing you proved, daily, without commentary, without applause, and the proof outlasted every word ever spoken. Because it was built into the ordinary machinery of their days. And it never once stopped running. 14 terms, not one of them romantic in the way we use that word now. No candlelight, no grand gestures, no declarations, just 2 people who got up every morning and did what the deal required, without negotiation, without therapy, without a single self-help book telling them what they already knew. The deal was not glamorous, it was functional, and it produced something that 40 years of modern relationship advice has not been able to replicate. Marriages that lasted, households that held, children who knew exactly where they stood. Number 1. The deal ended when one of them died, and the survivor kept it anyway. When he died, she still set 2 places at the table. When she died, his shirts were still pressed and hanging in the closet. A widow in 1974, still rising at 5:30, still making the coffee in the same aluminum percolator, still ironing on Tuesday, still keeping the household ledger even though there was only 1 column now. His chair in the same spot. His tools still on the pegboard in the garage, each one inside its pencil outline. She still kept the house ready by 5 o'clock. Not for him, for the promise. A widower who kept her garden alive for 11 years after she was gone, watering the roses she had planted, the roses he had never once asked about. with the hose she had picked out from the Sears catalog in 1961. Not because he cared about roses, because she had. The deal did not require a living partner. It only required a person who had made a vow so deep it became the architecture of their days. And when the other half was gone, the architecture did not collapse. It held, because the person still inside it refused to leave. The deal had no name, no contract, no witnesses. Two people stood in a kitchen in 1953 and began a partnership that neither of them would ever describe out loud. And the reason it worked is the reason it disappeared. It required two people who believed that some things are too important to talk about. And they were right. That deal held marriages together for decades. But holding together and being alive are not the same thing, and by the time the cracks became visible, everyone on the block already knew. The neighbors had read the signs long before either spouse admitted them to themselves. By then, the marriage was already a performance for an audience that had stopped believing the show. Sign 15, she started hiding grocery money. A wife who began tucking dollar bills into hiding places around the house was not saving for a new hat. She was building the only escape route available to her. The Maxwell House coffee can behind the flour canister, a $5 bill folded inside the cover of a Betty Crocker cookbook. She clipped coupons from the A&P circular every Wednesday and pocketed the difference. A woman on a $25 weekly grocery allowance in 1956 could hide $3 or $4 a month if she was careful. A Greyhound bus ticket to her sister's house in Louisville cost $4.60. She was not planning a vacation. She was pricing her freedom, and a woman who has started counting the cost of leaving has already left in every way that matters. But long before she hid the first dollar, the trouble had already surfaced in a place every neighbor could see. Sign 14. They stopped appearing together in public. A married couple in the 1950s was a social unit. When the wife started showing up alone at church on Sunday morning, the congregation noticed before the first hymn was over. The empty pew space beside her. The excuse relayed in the narthex afterward. A cold. Overtime at the plant. The ladies' auxiliary luncheon where she arrived alone and left before the cobbler was served. The 4th of July picnic where every other family arrived in one car. A 1950s community did not need a divorce filing to know a marriage was failing. All it needed was an empty chair. And if the neighbors saw it at church, the children saw something even more telling at the supper table. Sign 13. The silence at supper. When conversation left the dinner table, the marriage had already lost its last neutral ground. The clink of a fork against the plate and nothing else. In a decade when families ate together 6 or 7 nights a week, the table was where the day was exchanged. She set the table. He sat down. Grace was said if grace was still being said. 20 minutes of chewing. He pushed his chair back. She cleared the plates alone. The entire meal completed without eye contact. When even that ritual went silent, the house had 2 strangers sharing a mortgage. Sign 12. She stopped setting his place at the table, or she started overdoing it. Small shifts in a domestic routine told the truth before anyone spoke it. A placemat left in the drawer, or a table set with military precision as if performance could fill the silence. His coffee mug not on the counter at 6 in the morning, or the opposite. The good Corning ware brought out on a Tuesday. Beef stroganoff from the new Better Homes and Gardens cookbook on a Wednesday when meatloaf would have done. A wife trying to cook her way back to something that recipes could not fix. When a woman changed the rituals she had done on autopilot for 10 years, the change was never about the ritual. It was about what the ritual used to mean. The table was one stage, but the real performance was happening somewhere far more private. Sign 11. He slept in the den. When a husband started spending the night on the Davenport or the fold-out in the spare room, the marriage had physically separated. In a decade with no language for trial separation, a different room was the closest thing to one. The olive wool army blanket folded on the couch cushion. The Zenith television turned down low at midnight. She heard it through the wall. In a Sears catalog home with paper-thin walls, everyone knew. The children knew. They heard the footsteps pass their bedroom door and keep going. A twin bed in the spare room cost $19 at Montgomery Ward in 1955. Some men bought one and never moved back. He did not pack a suitcase. He walked 12 feet down a hallway. But in a 1950s house, 12 feet was as far as a man could go. 5 signs in, and not one of them involved a raised voice. Not a single thrown dish or slammed door. That was the nature of a failing 50s marriage. It did not explode. It contracted. It got quieter. It got more polite. And that politeness was the most dangerous symptom of all, because nobody had been taught to fear silence. Not the pastor, not the family doctor, not even the couple themselves. Today, Americans spend over $23 billion a year on therapy and counseling services. In 1955, the entire concept barely existed for ordinary families. Silence was not a cry for help. Silence was just how you got through Tuesday. Sign 10. The drinking changed. A highball after work was standard in the 50s. But when the drinking moved from the living room to the garage, from Friday to Tuesday, from one glass to most of the bottle, it stopped being social. Seagram's 7 Crown, Pabst Blue Ribbon, the clink of a bottle against a glass when the house was dark, a pint of Old Crow hidden in the glove box of the Ford Fairlane. She found the empties behind the workbench. He denied every one. A pint of whiskey ran $2 in change, cheap enough to sustain, too cheap to run out. A man who drinks in secret is not relaxing. He is self-medicating. And in the 1950s, a bottle was the only therapist most men would ever sit with. She saw the bottles. He saw something in her that unsettled him just as much. Sign 9. She got a job. When a married woman with children took a part-time job in the mid-1950s, it was not always about pin money. Sometimes it was about building a life she could stand on if the floor gave way. Part-time sales clerk at Woolworth's, $1.10 an hour. Receptionist at the dentist's office 3 mornings a week. She told him it was for Christmas money. Her own paycheck, her own name on it, deposited in a separate account at the savings and loan with a passbook small enough to keep in her handbag. In 1956, many banks routinely required a husband's signature before a married woman could open any independent financial account. The money was not the point. The point was a door she could open without asking anyone's permission. Sign 8. The pastor came to dinner. When the minister showed up for a weeknight supper that was not on the church calendar, someone had called. And in the 50s, help came in a clerical collar, the good plates out again, children told to behave, a pot roast that took all afternoon. The reverend seated at the head of the table where her husband usually sat. Gentle questions between bites. How are things at home? She poured Folgers from the percolator afterward while the 2 men talked in the living room. The pastor left with a handshake and a promise to pray. Nothing changed the next morning. The church was the last institution a 50s couple trusted with their private failure. When even that intervention changed nothing, there was nowhere left to go. And sometimes it was not the church that tried to step in. It was the wife's own mother. But the visit that was supposed to help often confirmed the worst. Sign 7. She went to her mother's for a visit, and the visit got longer. A wife who packed a bag for her parents' house and stayed a week was saying something she could not say in her own kitchen. When the week became 2, the message had been received. The Samsonite suitcase pulled from the hall closet. Children buckled into the back seat. The phone calls grew shorter every night. 3 rings. I am fine. The kids are fine. Good night. Her mother's kitchen smelling like percolated coffee and cinnamon toast. The narrow bed she had slept in as a girl. She called it a visit. He called it a visit. The children believed every word. But everyone over the age of 30 in that family knew exactly what it was. Sign 6. He stopped handing over the full paycheck. In millions of 50s households, the husband cashed his check on Friday and handed the cash to his wife. She ran the house on it. When the full amount stopped arriving, the contract was broken. $47 for a week's work at a factory job in 1956. She counted it at the kitchen table. Mortgage, electric, groceries, insurance. When the envelope came up short one Friday, 42 instead of 47, she knew. Another woman, another bar tab, a bet at the track. It did not matter where. What mattered was the LIE folded inside the paper envelope. The paycheck was the handshake of a 50s marriage. When it stopped being full, neither was anything else. 10 signs in, and a pattern has become clear. A 1950s marriage did not come equipped with an emergency exit. There was no therapist on speed dial, no support group at the YMCA, no forum at 2 in the morning where someone might understand. There were 2 people in a house with a 30-year mortgage and a set of vows the entire community had witnessed. The walls did not bend. The people inside them did. Today, nearly half of all American marriages end in divorce, and the average cost of that divorce is $15,000. In the 50s, the cost was different. It was not financial. It was total social erasure. So most people simply stayed. Sign 5. The children were sent away for the summer. When the children were shipped off to a grandmother's house for an unusually long stay, it was not always generosity. Sometimes it was clearing the house for a reckoning. A Greyhound bus ticket. A brown paper bag with 2 sandwiches and an apple. 8 weeks instead of the usual 2. Then the quiet phone calls between mother and grandmother the child was not supposed to hear. Something about daddy. Something about what she was going to do. The grandmother's house smelled like mothballs and lavender soap, a safe place that felt like exile when you were 9 years old. The children did not understand the reason until decades later. By then, most of them had children of their own, and suddenly, the summer at Grandma's made perfect, terrible sense. The children were removed from the house, but what they had already seen could never be removed from memory. Sign 4. The bedroom door stayed closed in daylight. A closed bedroom door during the daytime was an alarm in a decade when interior doors stayed open from sunrise to supper. It meant someone was crying or drinking or simply could not face the house for another hour. The brass knob that did not turn when a child reached for it. A wife still in her housecoat at 4 o'clock when supper should have been started. The Avon lipstick on the vanity untouched since Monday. Today we call it depression, a condition that affects more than 20 million American adults every year. In 1955, it did not have a clinical name in most households. It had a closed door and a mother who would be fine by tomorrow. Sign 3. He came home smelling different. A man who walked through the front door carrying a scent that did not belong to his house was carrying evidence. She did not need a detective. She had a nose, something floral when she wore Avon cotillion, the sweet heaviness of Shalimar on a wool overcoat collar, cigarette smoke when neither of them smoked. She smelled the collar when she hung the coat in the hall closet. She did not say a word. She ironed that same shirt the next morning and hung it back. In 1957, a wife who accused her husband of infidelity risked losing her home, her children, and her reputation. She was not fooled. She was trapped. And the most devastating part of a 1950s affair was not the betrayal. It was the math she had to do the morning after. Sign 2. She stopped wearing her wedding ring around the house. A gold band left on the kitchen windowsill was one of the most dangerous silent signals a 50s wife could send. The bare finger said everything. A plain gold ring. $10 at the jeweler's counter in 1952. Removed while kneading dough and left on the sill. Then left there the next day too. Then placed in the jewelry box on the dresser and not taken back out. A bare ring finger at the PTA meeting. At the Red Owl grocery store. The white indentation still visible on the skin where the band had blocked the sun for years. A man who noticed that ring on the windowsill for 3 straight days did not need to ask what it meant. He already knew. And in a decade when a woman held almost no institutional power, removing that ring was the loudest thing she could do without making a single sound. None of these signs would have made the evening news. None of them would appear in a court record. They lived in the narrow space between what a marriage looked like from the sidewalk and what it felt like from the kitchen sink. The 1950s taught an entire generation that enduring in silence was the same thing as being strong. It was not strength. It was silence dressed up in an apron and a pressed collar. And it fooled almost everyone. Sign 1. She ironed his shirts perfectly and felt nothing. The final sign a 1950s marriage had come apart was not an absence. It was a flawless performance. The wife who kept every ritual running while the woman inside the routine had already disappeared. Monday morning, the ironing board set up beside the kitchen window. The General Electric steam iron, $11 at Sears in 1954. She pressed the collar first, then the yoke, then each sleeve. The hiss of the iron on damp cotton, the smell of hot starch, every crease sharp, every gesture automatic. A woman running a household the way a person runs a machine, with precision, and nothing behind it at all. She did not stop loving him all at once. It left the way heat leaves a room after you turn off the radiator. Slowly, room by room, and by the time anyone noticed the chill, the fire had been out for a very long time. Millions of these marriages survived, not because they healed, but because leaving cost more than staying. A generation of women pressed shirts, set tables, and raised children inside homes that had gone cold years before anyone admitted it. Every daughter who watched from the hallway learned something no magazine or Sunday sermon ever had to teach her. What a marriage looks like when the love is gone, but the duty still shows up at 5:30 in the morning with a steam iron in her hand. Every segment you just watched is a different room inside the same locked house. The bankbook trapped her in it. The unspoken deal furnished it. The survival tactics, the hidden affairs, the unnamed depression, the visible cracks, all of it built by women who could not afford honesty because honesty cost more than they were allowed to earn. The cruelty was never hidden. It was organized by banks that required his name on her identity, by churches that called endurance a virtue, by a country that gave her a kitchen and called it freedom. She survived every room in that house, and she never got the credit. The silence was never voluntary.